Dosas are totally addictive. My daughter and I have been eating these for breakfast lately. What is a dosa? Dosas are thin, savory crepes popular in southern India. They're made from a batter of pureed and fermented split black lentils and rice. Traditionally, masala dosas are served with chutney made from either onions and tomatoes or coconut. And dosas are also served with sambar, which is a lentil vegetable stew with tamarind. Dosas can be enjoyed with different types of fillings such as curry potatoes. I've heard that there are versions of dosas including cheese dosas, Chinese dosas, and even pizza dosas. While I completely enjoy the potato filling and the sauces, often, I end up making just the crepes and filling it with other things I might have on hand, like scrambled eggs or leftover cooked vegetables. I hope no one out there is completely offended by my alternate and simplified use of dosas, but I want to thank the entire country of India for perfecting what is the best savory crepe I've ever had.
Let's begin by washing our beans. I've got 1/2 cup of split black lentils, which are also known as white urad dal. In fact, they go by a few different names which can be confusing. I've seen them called split black gram, split black urad dal, or just urad dal. They're black before they're skinned and white after they remove the skins, and they're not really a true lentil even though they're called lentils sometimes. I also have in here 2 tablespoons of split chickpeas, also known as chana dal. Give them a good rinse and then strain them. And then I'm going to add enough water to cover them by a couple of inches and soak them for 4 hours. You could soak them as long as 5 hours if you wish. This helps with digestibility. Now I'm going to rinse 1.5 cups of uncooked white basmati rice. Just pour some cold water over it, give it a little swish, and then we're going to drain that off. And do that several times. This really helps to release some of the starch from the rice as well. Now you might be wondering if you can substitute brown rice or other varieties of rice for the white basmati rice. And you definitely can do that. I just like the texture of the dosas using the white rice. So that's what I'm going to use in this recipe. And just like we did with the beans, we're going to cover this with some water and soak it for the same amount of time, which is about 4 to 5 hours. Soaking the beans in rice helps to make them more digestible and helps to reduce the anti-nutrients that naturally occur in beans and rice. So after 4 or 4.5 hours, our beans and rice are ready to prepare into our batter. But first, we're going to soak something called poha. Poha is a flattened rice, kind of like rolled oats, and we're going to soak it in water to cover for 30 minutes. I'm going to use my Vitamix blender to blend my batter, but you can use any high-powered blender. I've got my drained beans, and I'm going to place those in the blender. This is a larger blender, so I'm going to also add my rice and blend it all at once. But if you have a smaller blender, feel free to blend it in 2 separate batches. I'm adding 1 2/3 cup of cold water. And this is the soaked and drained poha. And this is a balance to get the right consistency. We want to get a batter that's thick but still pourable, and you don't want it runny. If it seems too thick, you can always add a little touch more water. Now it's time to ferment the batter. There are several ways to do this. I'm going to use my Instant Pot. If you don't have an Instant Pot, just pour the batter into any clean glass bowl or stainless steel container. Now mix the batter around with your hand. The warmth of your hand will help in the fermentation process, and it also gives you a better sense of the consistency. You may need to blend it again if it's not a perfectly smooth batter. You'll feel a little bit of texture in there, and that's okay, but we want it relatively smooth. You can ferment the dosa batter on the countertop, and it will take anywhere from 5 hours up to as long as 16 hours. But like I said, we're going to speed along this process and ferment it for just 8 hours in the Instant Pot. One more method is that you can also ferment it in the oven, and I'll put instructions for that in the recipe below the video. So my batter's in the Instant Pot. I'm going to lock the lid on, and I'm going to turn this on to the yogurt setting and let that go for 8 hours. And if you're not using an Instant Pot, just be sure to cover the bowl. Now it's time to let the fermentation gods work their magic. After 8 hours, we're going to release the lid and see what we got in here. Okay, this is nice and frothy and bubbly. You'll see that it increased in size. It will rise up a bit. And look at all those foamy bubbles. Oh my gosh, this is so light and fluffy. I'm adding 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt to the batter. Stir that throughout the batter, and the salt really helps to bring out the flavor in the dosas. Depending on the size of your crepes, this will make about 10 crepes. I'm going to use half the batter to make some fresh dosas, and then I'll refrigerate the remaining batter in a covered container in the fridge. It can swell up a little bit even in the refrigerator, so just make sure you put it in a big enough container to allow room for it rising a little bit. I'm heating up a cast iron round griddle. Heat this over high heat, and you want to make sure it's well seasoned or lightly oiled. Meanwhile, I'm boiling some carrots to make a very simple little filling for the dosas. As I mentioned, this is not a traditional filling at all, and you can feel free to make some spiced potato filling. Once the pan is hot enough, go ahead and add a ladle full of your batter onto the hot griddle. I'm going to use the back of a spoon to make a little spiraling motion here to spiral outward from the center to let the batter cover as much of the pan as possible. Now use some ghee, melted butter, or a little coconut oil to lightly brush the edges of the dosa. This helps to make it a little crispy. It has nice flavor. Pardon the loud sound of my overhead vent, but it's getting a little smoky in here, so I need to be running the exhaust fan. Now I'm going to carefully use my spatula to release the edges of the dosa. This is a gradual process. This is just like making pancake. The first one always looks a little awkward. They get better from here. Transfer the cooked dosa to a plate to cool. And then I'm going to lightly re-grease the skillet. These do stiffen up a little bit as they cool, so while they're warm, I like to fold them in half, almost like a taco, or roll them up into a big cylinder so it's easy to fill them with whatever fillings you like. Dosas are such a healthy option. They're gluten-free and they supply you with healthy carbohydrates, keeping you fuller longer. That's why I love eating them for breakfast. I feel like they're so satisfying and I don't get hungry as quickly. They're also low in saturated fat and a good source of protein, not to mention that they're so darn delicious. I ended up adding some green peas and cooked beans to my carrots for a super tasty filling. The possibilities are endless with dosa fillings. I'm sure you could even make a sweet variation. And if you do try it, let me know in the comments if you like it.
Here we go with perfect dosas. They're flexible, crispy, and you can fill them with whatever you like. Dosas are best eaten fresh. Thank you, India, for this wonderful recipe. I know I'm really adapting it and not serving it as it traditionally is served. Wow. So good, so versatile. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.